What is up, guys? Chad Malno here with another Team CMF tip for you guys. Alright, so today I want to talk about progressive overload and how if you're not progressively overloading in your training program, then you are completely wasting your time, sorry to say. But if you don't have, guys, on a serious note, if you don't have a coach already programming for you and that coach doesn't know or is already programming progressive overload training into your program, then you don't have to watch this video. But if you guys are going to the gym and you're kind of making up your own workouts, you don't have a coach and you're kind of lost, this is a great video, a great starting point for you to start to learn how to program for yourself or how to start making workouts for yourself, so at least you know for yourself that what you're doing is benefiting you and that in the long term you're going to get results. So what is progressive overload? It kind of is already giving it away in the title, but progressive overload, progressive equals progressing, and overload means adding or addition or adding of something over time. So progressively overloading over time. Now there's two main variables in progressive overload that I've written down here. Two approaches. One is intensity. How do we define intensity in training or in weightlifting? It is the percentage of your 1 rep max. Percentage of your 1 rep max a 1 rep max is the maximal amount of weight you can move for one single rep in any movement. Usually these are tested in the bench press, the back squat, the front squat, the deadlift, I don't know, a clean and jerk or snatch if you guys do Olympic lifting, but usually just the 4 main lifts: the overhead press, the bench press, the deadlift, and the back squat. Okay, so this is more of a strength bias. If you choose to progressively overload this way, it has more of a strength bias. We're gonna get into this more in depth in a second. And the second approach is volume. So how do we determine volume, or what does volume mean in a sense of training? It is sets and repetitions and how much you're doing of those sets and repetitions. This approach has more of a hypertrophy bias. Hypertrophy meaning muscle growth. So if you guys are looking to get stronger, you're gonna approach your progressive overload in your training with more of an intensity bias. And if you guys are looking to put on more size, mass, and muscle, you're gonna approach your training with more of a volume hypertrophy base. So I'm gonna break down both of them in the upcoming clips. The first clip that we're gonna break down is the intensity bias. So let's get after it. Okay, so this is a strength biased progressive overload using the variable of intensity. When you're trying to get stronger, intensity and progressively overloading with intensity is your main priority. Okay, so this is a simple 5-week phase of how somebody could get stronger. Now keep in mind, this is extremely basic. Usually a good program is between 12, 16, or 16 plus weeks, and you're progressively overloading over time with that. But this is an example of just a 5-week phase of a progressive overload. Okay, so week 1, let's just say that we're doing this for all our lifts, right? The bench press, the squat, the deadlift, whatever. But for now, we're just going to pretend like we're only doing this with the deadlift. Obviously, you're going to be doing different exercises, different accessory lifts after your strength portion, but just imagine that we're focusing solely on the deadlift right now. So week 1, we're going to do 5 sets of 8 at 70% of our 1 rep max. Week 2, this is where the progressive overload comes into play. We're increasing the weight we're doing, so now we're doing 77.5% of our 1 rep max, and we're decreasing the volume amounts of sets and reps, and we're doing 5 by 5 in week 2, okay? Now, moving over to week 3, we're reducing the volume once again, but increasing the intensity, the weight we're using. So we're doing a 5 by 3 instead of a 5 by 5, and we're doing 85% of our 1 rep max instead of 77.5% of our 1 rep max. Okay, week 4, following that same theme. Now you guys are probably starting to see a pattern here. We're decreasing the volume but increasing the intensity once again. So we're doing 3 by 2 at 90%, and we're also doing 2 sets of 1 at 95%. Fuck, that is fucking heavy. Okay, so since the intensity was so high, now we've overreached. Overreaching mean we've exceeded the point to which we cannot recover from the amount of intensity, the heavy lifts that we're doing. So now we need a deload week, right? So week 5, we're deloading. We're doing 5 sets of 10 at a really low intensity, a really low weight at 55%, could even be lower. 55% is probably on the higher end of a deload of our 1 rep max. After the deload, guys, you restart back at week 1 and repeat the process again with either different percentages. Maybe you would start at 72% instead of 70, but you're still progressively overloading from phase to phase too. Just like you're progressively overloading from week to week, you're also progressively overloading from phase to phase. So you could keep the rep scheme the same, but increase this to 72%. So week 1, instead of 70, doing 72%, remember this is for phase 2. For week 2, instead of doing 77.5%, you could start at 80%. For week 3, instead of doing 85%, you could do 87.5%. For week 4, instead of doing 90, you can do 92.5. And instead of doing 95% for the 2 sets of 1, you could maybe test for a new 1 rep max. Remember, that was for phase 2. So you're not only progressively overloading week by week, but also phase by phase, month by month, year by year. So that is going to sum up the intensity side. So now let's talk about, if you guys are more interested in gaining muscle and more of a hypertrophy type, then we can talk about that variable. So let's get right into it. Let's go, baby. All right, guys, now we're gonna talk about volume. So volume, once again, is progressively overloading or increasing your repetitions and your sets over time. So there's 3 ways we could do this. We could either solely increase reps over time, solely increase sets over time, or a combination of both. I'm gonna go through what all 3 would look like for you. Remember, what I'm writing on the board right here is solely examples. They are not set in stone things that you should follow. You either should do more research about it, reach out to a coach, or get a coach to write a program for you that emphasizes progressive overload. Anyways, let's get right into it, guys. So notice how there still are percentages on the board. I just wanted to clear up, first of all, you're still going to use percentages when you're using the volume variable, because how else would you know what weight you're going to use? It's not ideal to just guess, I'm gonna throw this weight on. If you're not progressing in weight and progressing in sets and reps, then you'll never ever grow muscle. Same thing with strength. If you're not progressing in weight and progressing in percentages of your 1 rep max, you'll never ever grow muscle. So let's go over this, guys. The first one we're gonna go over is solely just increasing the repetitions, not the sets. So week 1, this is an example once again, 5 sets of 8 at 77.5% of your 1 rep max. Week 2, notice how the reps went up, the sets stayed the same, but the percentage went down. The ideal percentage range for muscle hypertrophy or muscle growth is about 85% on the top end, on the high end, and about 60 or 65% on the bottom end. So 60 to 85% of your 1 rep max is the ideal weight range for muscle growth. So with that said, week 2, notice how sets stayed the same, reps went up, percentage went down. So 5 sets of 10 at 72.5% of your 1 rep max. Week 3, same theme. Sets stayed the same, reps went up, percentage went down. 5 sets of 12 at 65%. Week 4 should be the highest amount of volume you're doing. So 5 sets of 15, which is crazy amount of volume, that's 75 total reps for that exercise, at 62.5% of your 1 rep max. Okay, so since it was a high volume, you're probably overreached, you're probably having a hard time to recover from that, so now you need a week of deloading. 3 sets of 10 at 50% of your 1 rep max. Now, a good question that you guys are probably thinking, do you do 5 sets of 8? Do you do 5 sets of 10, 5 sets of 12, 5 sets of 15, 3 sets of 10 for every single exercise in your workout? It's not a bad idea, but you could progressively overload two specific exercises as well. But it's not a bad idea to start out, have a good starting point, following this sort of rep scheme for each exercise that you're doing. With that said though, not all programs do that. Majority of programs are progressively overloading in different ways for different exercises, but this is more of a brief overview. So that's going to cover if you're solely going to increase repetitions. Now let's go over what it's going to look like for you guys if we're going to solely increase the sets. Okay guys, so if you're solely going to increase the amount of sets you're going to do, the percentage of your 1 rep max will relatively stay the same, because the only thing that we're progressively overloading here is the amount of sets we're doing, which also increases the amount of volume we're doing. Volume being total sets and reps, right? So, okay, this is probably the least beneficial way to approach volume. The most beneficial way to approach volume, which is going to be the way that we talk about after this one, is a combination of both increasing the reps and sets and percentages over time. But anyways, I wanted to go over this because I wanted to go over every single factor that you could possibly do. So week 1, 3 sets of 12 at 70%. Week 2, increasing a set, 4 sets of 12 at 70%. Week 3, 5 sets of 12. Week 4, 6 sets of 12. So the theme there, obviously, increasing the amount of sets you do by 1 each week. 6 sets of 12, that's pretty high volume. Now you're going to need a deload week, week 5, going back down to 3 sets of 12. So that was the most basic one. It's probably the least beneficial one. If I'm going to recommend something to you guys, it's going to be the next one, which is combining both sets and reps, increasing them over time together with intensity as well. So let's go over that right now. So now we're going to talk about progressively overloading sets and repetitions and combined with intensity, all 3 at the same time. Remember, this is anything that you're prioritizing volume and emphasizing building volume over time means you're trying to build muscle. You're trying to promote a hypertrophy, a hypertrophic response in your body, which is a muscle growing response. So with that being said, let's get right into it. You're going to see 3 different themes here. You're going to see a theme with the sets, you're going to see a theme with the repetitions, and you're going to see a theme with the intensity. So week 1, we're doing 4 sets of 8 at 75% of your 1 rep max. Week 2, we're going to increase a set by 1. We're going to increase the repetitions by 2, and we're going to decrease the intensity or the weight by 2.5%. So we went from 4 by 8 at 75% for week 1 to week 2, 5 by 10 at 72% of our 1 rep max. Now we're going to follow that same theme for all 5 weeks, right? So week 3, 6 by 12, increasing a set, increasing the reps by 2, and decreasing the intensity by 2.5%. Week 4, 7 sets, increasing a set again, increasing the reps by 2, makes it 14 reps at 67.5% because we decreased the percentage by 2.5. Now this brings us to our deload week, which I didn't write in, but usually you want to do less volume than week 1 in your deload week because you're trying to use that week to recover, repair your body, and possibly another benefit of a deload week, not possibly, it definitely is, but if you choose to make it a benefit of your deload week, is focusing on form. Since the weight is light, you really could dial in on your form so that when you are in these progressively overloading weeks, you have better form, you're activating the correct muscles in the correct way, meaning that you're going to build those muscles better if you're activating them better, right? So just a quick example could be 3. Now my pen decides to stop working. What the fuck? We'll go to green. I don't know. Hopefully you guys like the color green. 3 by 8 at what's less, we'll call 70%. So notice in the deload week here, we reduced a set We kept the reps the same, but we're still doing less overall volume because 4 times 8 is more than 3 times 8, right? And we reduced the intensity from 75% to 70%. So definitely the best way to build muscle is progressive overload, right? The best way to progressively overload for muscle is progressively overloading your sets, your reps, and your intensity. Okay guys, now we're gonna get into the conclusion part of this. There's a couple more things I just wanted to touch upon before we end this video, but so far we're doing really good, guys. Thank you for tuning in so far. I hope you have a notepad down. If you don't have a notepad down, you should restart the video, write down notes for yourself so that you guys aren't wasting your time in the gym. All right, let's get into this final segment here. Oh, forgot to zoom in. And we're zooming in, and we're golden. Okay guys, so there's also something called total weekly volume. Total weekly volume refers to the amount of volume you're doing for each exercise. This is specifically referring to sets. So it's talking about how many sets you're doing for each exercise over the course of a week. So this is something else you could progressively overload. So I have a couple of guidelines here. This is the amount of total sets you could do per exercise per week is very individual. It depends on a lot of factors such as genetics, genetics in terms of how much volume your body could take, how your age, how fast you could recover, how well you're sleeping, how well you're eating, tons and tons of different individual factors. But I wrote down some general guidelines on amounts of sets you could do per exercise per week in order to progressively overload properly to build muscle, and to the higher end, towards the end of a phase, how high you could go and still be able to recover properly to build muscle. So week 1 is gonna be your lowest volume amount for sets. It's gonna look at about a total for the whole week of 10 to 14 sets per exercise, all right? Week 2, you're gonna look at about 12 to 15 sets per exercise for the total week, right? Week 3, it's gonna look at about 15 to 18 total sets per exercise for the whole week. In week 4, this is where things get really iffy, guys, because for me personally, or for people that have been training a lot, you could do 18 to 21 sets per exercise for the week, but that's only if you have a larger training experience. Some people can even go over 21 sets a week per exercise, but usually not. 21 is definitely kind of a cap off number. Week 5, you would reduce the volume. I didn't write that up again. I don't know why. Come on, Chad. Come on, bro. It would be less than week 1 because it's a deload week, so we're looking at about 8 to 10 sets on a deload week per exercise for the whole week. So this also depends on the types of exercise you're doing. For exercises that you can go heavier in, you're obviously not going to be able to do as many sets of them and still be able to recover to continue to do them throughout the week, right? But now these are exercises that, like the bench press, the deadlift, the back squat, the overhead press, more of your compound type lifts. But for exercises that you're doing isolating muscles, like biceps, triceps, calves, things like that, smaller muscle groups, rear delts, front delts, just shoulders in general, these muscles can recover a lot faster, and you could do a lot more frequency, a lot more sets of these types of exercises throughout the week. So that's pretty much going to wrap up this video, guys. I think I gave out a ton of information. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Leave a comment down below if you guys are more interested in this topic. I'd love to talk to you guys if you have any questions about progressive overload. And yeah, if you guys don't want, if you're too lazy to write a program for yourself that involves progressive overload, I am an online coach. This is how I program for my online clients, progressive overload. So if you guys are interested in that as well, the link to my website is in the bio down below, but I won't bore you with that, guys. My marketing strategy isn't to convince you to buy. It is to give you as much free knowledge as possible, and if you feel like buying, then great, go for it. Join the Team CMF. But anyways, guys, give this video a huge thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Hit that subscribe button, leave a comment, and I'll see you guys soon. Let's go.